to be joined today by senior columnist and insider at Sportsnet.ca, Eric Engels. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing great, Andrew. How are you?
Doing well. And I guess first, right off the bat, Eric, we'll get into your most recent conference call with some of the Montreal Canadiens players. And what all did you learn from those calls?
Yeah, I mean, the call started just a few weeks ago. I did a bunch of interviews with players before that. As far as what I learned is what I'm putting out there in terms of content and what everybody's learning. But, I think, you look at some varying players for some varying opinions from players. And, I think, we spoke to a guy like Ben Sherrod who would really like to get back to playing and get back to life as I think everybody wants to get back to kind of normal life in this situation that we're in. You had Brendan Gallagher express his opinion that until the NHLPA has a clear plan to sign off on, they don't really want to get running around with all the rumors. They've got a membership of over 700 players that they don't want the rumors to get to a point where everyone's discussing hypothetical scenarios instead of what they'll actually be voting on as a scenario to resume play. We had Philip Deneau the other day who expressed a very normal and humane kind of opinion about the fact that, if the league intends to operate in certain host cities and sequester players away from their families for extended periods of time, he's not too interested in that, particularly as a player on a team where the playoffs are kind of out of reach. I think a lot of the Canadiens in general feel that so long as there's no playoff possibility for them, and I'm not sure whether or not there will be, but if there isn't, they'd rather get prepared, get into their off season and come back because there's big expectations on them going into next season, and they'd rather just move on to that.
Well, recently we've had the privilege of seeing some of the Canadiens' 93 Stanley Cup run on Sportsnet. We've seen games 1 and 2 of that series. They seem to be playing those on repeat. Do you have any idea if we're going to be able to see the rest of the series?
Yeah, we're seeing the rest of the series. It's all planned out. It's been scheduled. I think games 3 and 4 run Friday and Sunday this week. So that's something to look forward to. I know I've watched those games a lot of times over the years, but it never really gets old for me watching them. And at the time I was 10 years old and really coming into my own as a Canadiens fan growing up in Montreal. All that's changed with my role over the last 13 years as a reporter on the team, but you still have that kind of nostalgic feeling of what that was like and living through it. And it brings back a lot of good memories. And also it's been fun just watching the hockey from that era. It's so different, in a lot of ways, it's nowhere near as good as what we watch now. And in a lot of ways, there's a certain element to it of physicality and passion and character that kind of shines through. And especially when it's a Stanley Cup final, I mean, you have two teams that battled so hard to get there, and you look at LA's road there, it was anything but easy, specifically in the conference finals against Toronto. And Montreal's road there, you could say that it was paved by God, but they still had to go out and win those games against some really good teams. Their first round really set them up for the run they went on because Quebec was such an incredible team at the time. They really were a cream of the crop team with a bunch of rising young talented players. And the Canadiens themselves were somewhat underestimated as a team, and they kind of backpedaled into the playoffs. So to get over the hump with that series, and speaking to some of the players that were on that team recently, whether it was Patrice Brisebois or Guy Carbonneau, or they basically said that was the key stepping stone on their run, was to get past Quebec and come back out of the 2-0 hole and find their way to the finals. So it's cool to watch. I loving watching it. And speaking to some of the current Habs players, like a guy like Sherrod was saying that these rewind games on Sportsnet have been carrying him through his days. So I think it's been great for a lot of people.
Back to the current pause that all sports are on for just a moment. Given the situation that Marc Bergevin has with the Canadiens in trying to make the team better, are there any advantages to having all this extra time, or does his plan remain unchanged regardless of when the season resumes?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody's plan is unchanged at this stage. This has thrown a major wrench into whatever plans everybody has, and you have to be constantly evolving and preparing for what the future might hold. Marc Bergevin is a good GM, and I think that he will be using this time wisely to set forth his plan, to go over. all the hypothetical situations that Brendan Gallagher would like the players to ignore, they're the hypothetical situations that Marc Bergevin has to entertain to the nth degree in every capacity to ensure that he's planned appropriately for what hockey looks like when it comes back and how the team is shaping up and how the cap might affect his plans. And I think we can all agree, just looking at capfriendly.com, they do a great job there. You know, the Canadiens are certainly better positioned to deal with a flat or potentially decreasing cap than a lot of teams are. But it's not worth much if you don't manage the situation well. So I'm sure Mark and his team of guys around him are very much focused on all the different scenarios that could play out and how they'll take advantage.
We're looking forward to seeing guys like Romanov and possibly Caufield coming in next season. Based on what the Canadiens learned about Jesperi Kotkaniemi and what happened with him in this last year, do you think they're going to be a lot more cautious with these two guys as they eventually join the roster?
I don't think their philosophy is going to change. I mean, first of all, they're not going to expose players to more than they're capable of handling, and the players ultimately, you know, when Marc Bergevin likes to lean on the on that saying that players make the decisions for them as somewhat of a crutch, there's a lot of truth in that. You know, if a player shows himself to be prepared to play, and there's an opportunity for him to make the team, he'll make the team. But Claude Julien is the coach, and he's the guy who's going to ultimately decide how he's going to use that player. And the player will ultimately make the decision for Claude as to how he can use him. And, you know, you could talk about Jesperi Kotkaniemi and how much he was sheltered by the Canadiens. It's not like he didn't earn his way onto the team when he did. And he was sheltered with good reason, given what we saw from him as time moved along. And he's been put down in the American Hockey League for good reason. I don't believe his development will be stunted by any of that. I look at Nick Suzuki, perfect example of a player that dictates how he's going to be used. He just clearly was prepared for the responsibility that Claude Julien was giving him. So, you know, all in all, I don't think there's a general basic formula that you adhere to in this when it comes to player development. You really have to treat each player as an individual and ultimately have a very good gauge of where they are in the process. You know, they made a clear decision on Caufield. They saw his play this year. I think a lot of people focus on the 2 weeks of the World Juniors. I could tell you right now, the executives don't think that way. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to see a player, you know, at the highest level of competition, but it's a 2 week period, and it's all about the big picture and everything involved. And I think they saw a lot of really good things from Caufield this year as a pure freshman in the NCAA, and they made a good decision on keeping him there for another year and allowing him to just get that much stronger and grow into his role. And because they know that when he does inevitably come, he's going to be an impact player here, and the decisions they make now in his development are going to be critical to him becoming that. Romanov, different story. Like 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid who has 2 years of professional experience under his belt. He's played against pros. Ben Sherratt was telling me the other day, I keep leaning on Ben Sherratt, but I really do enjoy talking to the guy. One of the things he said was, like, he watched Romanov play at the World Juniors, and the thing that stood out most to him was that, like, he wasn't doing things that most 19-year-olds do. He wasn't forcing plays. He was playing like an actual pro. I think Marc Bergevin has done a pretty good job setting the expectations around Romanov's arrival, saying that he'll be a third pairing defenseman to start, and he'll have to earn his way into that role. And, you know, we expect that probably within 4 or 5 years, he'd become a top 4, top 2 type guy. That's his potential. I think that process probably could happen quicker, but it's going to be up to Romanov to prove that it will. So, you know, the formula, and it's up for debate because, you know, some players have not developed the way they should have. And right now the plan is so contingent on drafting and developing that they have to get it right. But the formula has to be individualized. It can't just be a blueprint that you apply to everybody.
What do you think it is about Marc Bergevin and how he sold Jeff Molson on his plan to retool the team?
I think Marc Bergevin, his first 5 years of his tenure, did a really, really good job, to the point where he barely made a mistake. And then he went through a 1.5-year phase where almost everything he did was bad. Like it didn't go well. It didn't make sense. And he made a few mistakes, and it's because he was trying to put his own stamp on the team, and it's because he felt that there was a fundamental change needed. And for whatever reason, some of the decisions that he tried just didn't work. And it was at that point that it was myself or a number of other people that felt that there was justification for him to potentially lose his job at that point in the summer of 2018. But once he was secured in his role at that time, he clearly sold Jeff Molson on a long-term plan and an unwillingness to sacrifice the youth of the team for short fixes. I think it's a smart philosophy to have. I think he was set up for success once he got that endorsement from Jeff in that situation, and I think he's executed since then. It's easy to look at 2 playoff misses in a row since that point in time and say, this is an abject failure, and they tried to make the playoffs and also tried to build at the same time. Like 96 points gets you in the playoffs 17 of the last 20 years. It was enough for them to make it by 6 points in the West last year. And it's just unfortunate that it didn't happen for them. And it's not to say that they deserve to be there, because there were 8 teams, obviously, that deserved to be there more than they did. But I wonder how differently people would view the last 2 years if they had actually made it with 96. As far as this year is concerned, it's a big disappointment. Claude Julien runs a very demanding system. I think the Canadiens in general, the injuries that they suffered took a lot out of the way they wanted to play. Specific players like Byron and Drouin going down, and Drouin had proven a lot out of the gate of this season. But those guys are instrumental in the speed game that Montreal wants to play, and there was a certain level of talent lacking in the depth pool at the American Hockey League level. Like the Canadiens have a top 5 prospect pool, but you look at the American Hockey League level just this season, and the talent is not necessarily there. It was more at the other levels, be it coming up from junior and just in that transition mode, or playing pro in Europe. And now the fruits of it are starting to come through, because the last 2 drafts the Canadiens have been excellent, and that's why they have a consensus top prospect pool. So as these players start to come, because Trevor Timmons always says, and not just Trevor Timmons, basically everybody who handles the draft for their respective team says it takes 3 to 5 years to properly develop players. And yes, this is an NHL where players that are 18 years old are excelling more than ever before. But that doesn't mean that every 18-year-old kid is going to be prepared to take on what it means to be a professional and be able to perform on a consistent basis in the NHL. And I think there's a very select group of the ones that are playing at 18 in the league that are actually ready for it and really thriving and succeeding. So it's, getting back to the point that you asked me about is, in a bit of a roundabout way, sorry for a long answer, is I think Marc Bergevin was sold Jeff Molson on a long-term plan that he's executing on. And I think there is pressure to make the playoffs, but that long-term plan seems to be more important to both parties.
But given all the prospects they've been acquiring and the plan that Bergevin has sold Jeff Molson on, how long do you think it is until Montreal is a Stanley Cup contender?
The thing about that question is that, and it's a question that I asked specifically to Marc Bergevin, and he didn't have an answer, or at least didn't give a particularly strong one after trade deadline, which is understandable. Like, trade deadline is a really tough day for GMs. They've so much time has been spent, not really excusing it. That press conference, in my opinion, was it was utterly confusing, and that's what I wrote about that day. But at the end of the day, you look back at it in hindsight with some perspective, and it's a tough situation to handle. Brian Burke came on our airways after that, and he was asked specifically about Bergevin's answers in that press conference, and he said, I've been a GM in this situation, whether it's Mark or Kyle Dubas in Toronto, and things aren't going exactly as people expect them to be. And all you're looking to do is not give reporters a bulletin board type quote that will haunt the team for an entire summer. You could see that Mark went in 20 different directions with every answer he gave. So it was hard to pin down what his view is on the long-term health of the team and how quickly they can contend. I'm going to say this. There are a lot of players in Montreal right now between the ages of 20 and 24 that are right on the cusp of like kind of hitting their primes. And you have some players that are right in the middle of their prime. So like there is a scenario here where things can come very quickly. And it's going to depend on the youngest members coming up and being impactful players immediately. You know, their development is the most critical element is in this reset. But you have other players that are, you know, 23 kind of guys like whether it's Max Domi or Jonathan Drouin or Arturi Lekkinen or Joel Armia, who's a little bit older, but they're right in that beginning phase of their prime, and that's where you can see a big step forward. And you know, again, coming back to a conversation with Sherrod a couple of weeks ago for a Q&A that I posted on Sportsnet, he talked about the Jets going from out of the playoffs to conference finals, and not just because the young guys stepped up their game and found another level, but because a guy like Blake Wheeler at 28, 29, or 30 years old found a whole other level to his game. So it's everybody improving at once to get you there. And I think the Canadiens and the age variance they have and the players they have and the leadership group they have, they can get there a lot quicker than a lot of their fans would tend to believe. But it's really contingent on the Cole Caufields and the Romanovs and whoever, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Paling and Suzuki all developing the right way and becoming the players that we believe they can be.
There was some noise about, at least at the trade deadline or just after it, that Marc Bergevin may attempt to make a splash this summer. Now, if that's the case, would he have to sacrifice one of these great young prospects to try to get a now player?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to. I haven't heard any specific names, and a big reason. I mean, if things were normal right now, and it was mid-April, and the Canadiens were out of the playoffs, and we had the draft lottery settled, and we kind of knew where we were going, I'd be hearing probably a lot of names of what they're considering doing come summer. But the entire apple cart has not only been upset, it's been turned into an orange cart. Like we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone down the line. So it's hard for me to kind of speculate on what they might do and what they're looking to do. You know, defense is obviously a position where they feel the need to upgrade, but you know, Romanov is coming, and that's going to be one element. Whether or not they're able to pin down another one in the offseason, I think it's a target for them, but it's a moving target. I'm not too sure who the names are that they're cycling through. I think a backup goaltender is a top priority for them. I think they'd love to get an impact forward. You know, you look at what Armia was able to do in the last two seasons and the progress there. You look at what Kovalchuk did in a very small window of time with the Canadiens. I bring up those two players specifically because they kind of show you how much a bit of size up front combined with that skill level, how far that can kind of take you. And I think, you know, that's a target for them, trying to get an impact forward that's sizable, especially with what they have in the pipeline. And what it's not to say that, look, they're not a small team. They've been categorized as a small team. They're kind of right middle of the pack. On defense, they've got some big bodies. And up front, they've got a couple big bodies, and especially if Kovalchuk comes back, which as I've reported, is most likely going to happen. Although we'll see. There's a lot of stuff that can happen between now and then, depending on what happens in the playoffs, or if there are playoffs, or how he feels, and what the long layoff will do to him. There's a lot of X factors, but we'll see. We'll see what they go after, what they want to do. I don't think their intention is to sell off any of these top level prospects they have, but if they have an opportunity to get a player that's in that prime wheelhouse of the age 23 to 28, and it means giving up an underdeveloped player to get that, I don't know that they would necessarily hesitate to do that.
What Canadian city do you believe will hoist the Stanley Cup next?
I really don't know. It's it's really hard to say. Any one of them could develop into a contender pretty quickly. I think Toronto is obviously ahead of the pack in terms of the premier talent they have, but there's a lot of things that need to be put in place for them to truly be considered a cup contender, and a lot of things that need to go right for them to win. I like what Vancouver's building. You know, there's a couple of things in the way of what they're building. Whether it's a bad deal or two that they've signed over the last few years, but all in all, like the premier talent coming up there, and the commitment to defense, and depending on what happens with Jacob Markstrom, like there's a pretty good opportunity there. Calgary's got a lot of good young talent and good management and a really good goalie. I don't know, like I would put the Leafs at the top of the pack, but I don't know that that means necessarily that they would win sooner than any of the other Canadian franchises. And I think there's kind of somewhat of a level playing field, whether it's between Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton. I mean, Edmonton is clearly on the rise and clearly in the process of getting some more talent to surround McDavid and Draisaitl. Those two guys are cream of the crop superstars. So you really put me on the spot because I'm giving you the most wishy-washy answer possible. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know. I don't have an answer. It's terrible. I'm actually ashamed of myself, but I really don't have an answer.
Were you surprised to learn that after all his time in Montreal, Thomas Plekanec never tasted a poutine in Montreal?
No, he was a very well-conditioned athlete who really took care of number one first. And I'm just surprised that when he did his little Q&A Instagram thing that fans were able to hear his answers, because he was notorious for speaking far too quietly in our press scrums, which is an inherited quality that Brendan Gallagher has carried forward, and it drives me insane. You know how close you have to get to a player with a cell phone to hear him properly if he's speaking at an inaudible level? And in Montreal, where the scrums are way bigger than every other market, God, I hope I would do anything for us to return to those days. I hope we do have them again with this whole coronavirus thing. But I definitely have not spent enough time busting Thomas Plekanec's chops for speaking as inaudibly as he did for however many years he was a member of the Montreal Canadiens.
I can't help but think of the editors in the cutting room, just that he drove them nuts, unless you were included in that too. But
oh, they're lucky. They got the reporters with the hockey stick boom mics. They can get in there real close without getting too close. And for me, it's like if I'm late to a Thomas Plekanec scrum, I'm just not clipping him. Forget it.
So with The Last Dance coming out, shifting gears to the Chicago Bulls, Jordan or LeBron?
Oh, it's Jordan. It's never been LeBron. It's always been Michael Jordan. I don't understand why this is even a debate. It's not even like it's like Jordan or Kobe. Like there's no like LeBron is great and everything, but this is a different era of basketball. And far be it from me to really weigh in with an opinion that anybody should care about. Hockey's the sport that I pay closest attention to outside of golf. But I watched the NBA. I was an avid fan of the NBA in the days that Jordan was playing, and it was because of the way the game was played at that time versus how it's played now. And it's just Michael Jordan's like, outside of Tiger Woods, the most dominant athlete I've ever seen in my life. I have there's three guys at the top for me, and I'm probably leaving a few sports out, but out of the majors, like to me, it's Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan and Roger Federer on one plane, and then like everyone else. You could probably put Usain Bolt there. Pick your favorite soccer player out of the greatest of all time. Messi's been pretty dominant. But yeah, I think LeBron is the best player in today's game, or has been at least for the last decade. But Michael Jordan all the way.
Well, as you can see behind me, I think it's right here. Can't disagree with you. But I also have to say that I did put Kobe Bryant down here as well. God rest his soul. 5 championships. LeBron still got 3. So I can't help but think, why isn't Kobe Bryant in this conversation?
I think he is. And not just because it's some sort of recency bias or, wanting to honor his legacy because he passed in such a tragic way. Like, if you watched Kobe play throughout his career, there was nobody like him. He was just completely dominant and very much the same kind of mentality. Kobe was a trendsetter, like for the modern game in terms of the way he approached the game, but very much the same mentality as Michael of, this is my game and I'm going to own it. And I think you watch these Last Dance episodes and, just listening to the way Michael views his role on the team and the way he needed to be convinced by Phil Jackson to spread the ball around, or the way, he would have done anything for Doug Collins, who put the ball in his hands, or the whole "there's no I in team, but there is one in win." I just, it makes me think of some conversations I've had with PK Subban, and a lot of the reasons why he's not necessarily embraced in hockey is because like those were his biggest role models, like guys like Kobe and guys like Michael Jordan, and when the game's on the line, he wants the puck, and we've seen it work out pretty well in the playoffs. And you could say a lot of things about PK Subban, but when it comes to playoff hockey, he comes up huge in big moments, and we saw it in Montreal, saw it in Nashville, and hopefully for PK we see it again soon, because this was understandably not a good season for him, and he's got something to prove now.
All right, you and my wife have this one of the same favorite movies of all time, and that's Rocky IV. And you got to tell me, if you can, your favorite scene from Rocky IV.
Oh my God, my favorite scene from Rocky IV. I love the training montage. You're asking me the hardest questions possible. Who's the first Canadian team to win the next Stanley Cup? That one's pretty tough. Pick a favorite scene in a movie that I've seen 8,000 times. Hang on, let me ask my wife. What's my favorite scene in Rocky IV? She has no idea because she doesn't watch it. She doesn't.
Oh, no.
Falls asleep every time I watch it. It's definitely not. I'll tell you what my least favorite scene is, when he gives that little speech at the end to the Russian people. That's ridiculous. It's just absurd. I think it's when Drago picks up the Russian trainer in the middle of the fight, or like the politician dude, and just tosses him. I think that might be my favorite moment in the movie.
I'm surprised you don't like his speech at the end, because I know it might be kind of cheesy, but I always thought it was like a very uniting speech. How, if everybody can change, maybe we can all. Anyway, but
yeah, but it's like, when did Rocky become a philosopher after getting punched in the head 35,000 times? Like, it's a weird political kind of thing. I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me. I prefer Drago picking up that politician dude, tossing him, and being like, "I win for me." He goes, "Yes, yes." I love that.
That's a different answer. That's what we're looking for. That's beautiful. All right, best hair in broadcasting. Again, not named Kyle Bukauskas.
Oh man, you took the only answer I had. What broadcaster has good hair? Joe Micheletti's not bad. He's all right.
Okay, how about we include Kyle in that?
Yeah, Kyle for sure. Kyle, top of the top notch.
I wasn't trying to put a wedge between him and Gene Principe, but Kyle laid down his mantle and let Gene have it. So,
oh my God, Kyle's hair is a Ferrari to Gene's Chevy Impala.
All right, you might like this one. Best golf swing: Tiger Woods in his prime or Rory McIlroy?
Rory McIlroy has the best golf swing I've ever seen. It's perfect. It's actually perfect. Tiger Woods' golf swing, pretty perfect also. Not going to criticize Tiger Woods' golf swing. I'm a huge Tiger fan. I love Tiger. But there's something about Rory's flexibility that's insane. It's not normal. And it's his swing, timing wise and just tempo wise, it's literally perfect. I just wish he could hit a wedge better.
Well, that was an easy one because it was one of the tweets you sent out today. So thank you for the assist on that one, sir. Last question for you, my friend.
It wasn't a slam dunk, by the way. Adam Scott has a pretty good swing. He might be up there with the best swing of all time.
You were only able to cover one other team and one other city for the rest of your career. What would it be? What would it be and why?
I'd pick the LA Kings. Just let me live in California and we're good. Nothing to do with the team. I don't care what team it is. I would love to live in California. That would be great. Actually, you know what? Seattle would be pretty cool.
Seattle. Very good.
Seattle would be pretty cool.
Shameless plug for the Seattle team that is yet to be. Well, Eric, this was fun. Thank you so much for taking the time. Folks, if you haven't followed Eric already on Twitter, you can do so. Eric, if you even want to just go ahead and give your Twitter handle for those that are not currently following you.
Screw those people.
Well, they're missing out anyway. If they aren't already following you, they're missing out. This was a blast. Eric Engels from Sportsnet. Thanks so much for taking the time today, my friend.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.